7 years ago, the fall of an empire. Heavy rain poured down on New York City, each drop striking the glass windows of Grayson Enterprises like the final whispers of a dying empire. Jonathan Grayson stood by the window of the CEO's office, his icy blue eyes gazing down at the bustling streets below. He wasn't looking at the hurried crowds seeking shelter from the rain, nor did he care for the dazzling neon lights. To him, everything had become nothing more than the ashes of past glory. On his desk, a crumpled suicide note lay silently beside a half-empty bottle of whiskey. His father was gone. A bullet, a letter, and a financial scandal had shattered the Grayson family. Jonathan clenched his fists so tightly that his nails nearly dug into his palms, but pain alone could not erase the fury burning inside him. He knew exactly who was responsible. Westwood Enterprises, or more precisely, Albert Westwood, the man who had used despicable tactics to drive Grayson Enterprises to ruin, and Jonathan swore he would return to take back everything. 7 years later, a crumbling empire. Westwood Enterprises, once a powerful conglomerate, now stood on the brink of bankruptcy. The company's headquarters still towered over the financial district, but inside it was deteriorating like a sinking ship. The once bustling hallways were now eerily silent. Employees whispered amongst themselves, sharing grim rumors. Whispers that the company wouldn't last another month, that they would soon lose their jobs, that Westwood Enterprises was about to become a relic of the past. Serena Westwood would not allow that to happen. Sitting in the CEO's office on the top floor, she felt everything crumbling around her. But she could not fall apart. Because this wasn't just a company, it was her father's lifelong legacy, the pain of loss, the fear of failure. The death of Harold Westwood, her father, the founder of the empire, had come like a storm, sweeping away everything in its path. He had not just been a businessman, he had been a devoted father. He had spent his entire life building Westwood Enterprises, turning it into one of Europe's top financial powerhouses. And yet, within a year of his passing, everything collapsed. Serena blamed herself. She hadn't been able to lead the company as well as he had. She had allowed Westwood to fall into crisis. The numbers on the financial reports felt like daggers stabbing into her heart each day. $800 million in bank debt, stock prices down 60% in just 3 months, major shareholders losing faith and withdrawing investments, the media calling Westwood a dying corporation. She had tried everything, negotiating with the banks, seeking investors, even considering selling off company assets. But no one wanted to touch a sinking ship. She was racing against time, but the faster she ran, the closer she came to the edge of a cliff, and there was no way out. A boardroom under fire. The vast conference room of Westwood Enterprises had turned into a battlefield. Seated around the long table were older men, their faces tense, some even visibly furious. "Serena, you can't keep running the company like this," an elderly shareholder snapped, his voice laced with frustration. "We are sinking. Do you have a real plan?" another demanded. Serena took a deep breath, struggling to remain composed. "I had a meeting with the bank last week. If we can demonstrate recovery potential, they may consider extending our loans." "Demonstrate? Who do you think will believe empty promises?" a shareholder interrupted. "No one trusts a dying company, Serena. We need a real solution." "The only solution," another voice cut through the tension, "is to sell the company." A chill ran down Serena's spine. "No!" She rejected the idea instantly. "Westwood is not for sale." "Then what's your plan? Sit here and watch it crumble?" Serena bit her lips so hard she nearly drew blood. She had considered hundreds of strategies, but none of them were viable. The truth was, she couldn't save this company alone. She needed someone strong enough to back her up. But who? Who could help her when the entire financial world had turned its back on Westwood Enterprises? And then Jonathan appeared. "Good evening, Ms. Serena. I have something to discuss with you." Serena struggled to remain calm. Jonathan Grayson. The name made her entire body tense. 7 years had passed since she last saw him, but she knew he had returned. No longer a disgraced outcast, no longer a furious son burning with resentment. He had returned as a king. The world around her seemed to spin. He had taken over her company, acquiring the majority of her family's shares. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and she knew Jonathan hadn't come to save her. He had come to destroy her. "What do you want?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "You already know what I want." He leaned in slightly, his gaze tightening around her like an invisible noose. "I will pay off all of Westwood Enterprises' debts. I will save your company." Serena narrowed her eyes, suspicion creeping into her voice. "And in return?" Jonathan smirked, enunciating each word with deliberate slowness. "You will marry me for 1 year." Serena froze. She hadn't expected this. "You're joking." "I never joke." Jonathan arched a brow. "Marry me or lose everything." A sharp pain twisted in Serena's chest. She knew that if she refused, the company would collapse. Thousands of employees would lose their jobs. Her father's legacy would be devoured by a man she barely knew. But if she agreed, she would have to live with the most dangerous man she had ever met. A man whose gaze burned like wildfire, capable of consuming everything in its path. Serena stared at Jonathan, desperately searching for a flicker of sincerity in his piercing eyes. But all she saw was control. He didn't just want her company, he wanted to own her. She clenched her fists, trying to suppress the tremor in her hands. At last, Serena picked up the pen and signed the cold, emotionless marriage contract before her. Jonathan took the paper, satisfied. "Congratulations, Mrs. Grayson. We've just entered a high-stakes gamble." She met his gaze, her voice like a blade. "Don't celebrate too soon, Grayson. This game isn't over yet." Jonathan chuckled, amusement flashing in his eyes. "Oh, trust me, Serena. This game has only just begun." And so, the fateful gamble had officially begun. Welcome to Soul Stories. You're now part of the Soul Stories family where heartfelt tales touch the soul. Your support, follows, comments, and feedback fuels us to create meaningful stories filled with deep emotions. Each story is a small gift, bringing warmth and joy amid life's chaos. We may not please everyone, but your thoughts help us improve and reach more hearts. Subscribe to never miss a new story. Invite friends and family so our community can soon reach 10,000 members. Soul Stories, stories that touch the soul. Welcome to hell, Mrs. Grayson. The Rolls-Royce rolled slowly past the heavy iron gates, entering Grayson Manor, the place that would now be Serena's home. But to her, this was no home. It was a gilded cage. Grayson Manor was nothing like the lavish, opulent estates Serena had seen before. It exuded an air of authority and cold detachment, much like its owner, Jonathan Grayson. Somber gray stone walls, heavy dark wood doors, and elegant yet unwelcoming interiors gave the place a distinct lack of warmth. The moment she stepped inside, the air felt suffocatingly still. "You can choose any room you like as long as it's not mine." Jonathan's deep, indifferent voice echoed from behind her. Serena turned around, crossing her arms as she raised an eyebrow in challenge. "Isn't this my home now? I thought a wife should have the right to sleep with her husband." Jonathan smirked, but his eyes held no warmth. "Don't be mistaken, Serena. You're my wife on paper. Nothing more, nothing less." Serena chuckled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So should I play the obedient wife? Or do you want me to just stand beside you like a pretty puppet, as you expect?" Jonathan stepped closer, his face mere inches from hers. His breath was warm against her skin, but his eyes were cold as ice. "As long as you don't embarrass me in public, I don't care what role you choose to play." Serena stared into his piercing blue eyes, then suddenly laughed. "Then brace yourself, Grayson. I'm not a puppet you can control." Jonathan said nothing, but deep inside, a storm was brewing. A perfect business arrangement. Their marriage functioned like a flawlessly executed business contract. Jonathan paraded Serena through the elite social circles, from charity galas to art auctions to high-profile corporate summits. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. Jonathan, cold yet powerful. Serena, stunning, intelligent, and effortlessly charming. She played the role of Mrs. Grayson without a single flaw. She smiled sweetly whenever Jonathan placed a hand on her waist for the cameras. She tilted her head attentively while he discussed business with partners. She gently placed her hand over his whenever they appeared in public together. It was all a performance. But behind the doors of Grayson Manor, they were nothing more than strangers. Jonathan remained distant, treating her as just another piece in his grand revenge scheme. And Serena? She wasn't going to make it easy for him. Jonathan had expected Serena to be the obedient, picture-perfect wife. He had underestimated her. Serena began to ignore him, right in his own domain. She never waited for him to have dinner. When he spoke, she would brush past him as if he were invisible. Whenever he requested her presence at an event, she made sure to arrive late, just to irritate him. Jonathan was not the kind of man who was easily provoked, but Serena was an exception. "Are you trying to provoke me, Mrs. Grayson?" One evening after returning from a gala, Serena walked straight up the stairs without a word. Jonathan watched her in silence. He didn't care about her. At least that's what he had always told himself. But seeing her smile at other men, seeing her so carefree, so utterly indifferent to him, stirred an unfamiliar irritation within him. Jonathan Grayson did not like being challenged. He strode toward her, grasping her wrist, forcing her to stop. "You're deliberately trying to piss me off, aren't you?" Serena raised an eyebrow, yanking her hand free, her voice laced with mockery. "Oh? So the great Jonathan Grayson is finally paying attention to his wife?" Jonathan's gaze darkened. Serena knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't stop herself. She wanted to see, was Jonathan Grayson truly an emotionless machine? Or was there something buried beneath that icy facade? Their battles were not confined to the dinner table or the extravagant parties. The bedroom had become a battlefield too. Jonathan insisted they sleep in separate rooms. Serena deliberately chose the room right next to his, making intentional noises every night just to tease him. One evening, Jonathan walked into her room and found her setting up a poker game. He crossed his arms, watching her warily. "What are you doing?" "Playing cards." Serena shrugged. "Care to join? Or we could play something else instead." Jonathan took a deep breath. This woman had no concept of fear. At first, Jonathan had seen their marriage as nothing more than a means to exact revenge. But as the days passed, he realized he was slowly being drawn into Serena's game. He started noticing her more. Seeing her with another man left an odd, unsettling feeling in his chest. When she smiled, he found himself unable to look away. Jonathan didn't want this. He didn't want to feel anything for the daughter of his enemy. But Serena was no longer just Albert Westwood's daughter in his eyes. She had become something far more dangerous. "You are the most dangerous game I've ever played, Serena." One evening, Jonathan stood on the balcony, gazing down at the dazzling city lights. Serena stepped out, standing silently beside him. Neither of them spoke, yet in that quiet moment, something had changed. Jonathan realized he was no longer in control, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. Serena Westwood had never believed in the simplicity of black and white. She understood that the business world was a battlefield, where the strong could turn victims into villains with a single well-timed piece of news. But the more she dug into the bankruptcy of the Grayson family 7 years ago, the more she realized that something didn't add up. The financial scandal that Jonathan had always believed was orchestrated by her father. There was no concrete evidence, only rumors, leaked reports, media articles crafted to manipulate public perception. Why would her father, Albert Westwood, a meticulous businessman, do something so reckless? Why had Grayson Enterprises fallen so quickly, so easily, as if someone had orchestrated it? For an entire week, Serena pored over old records, financial reports, and correspondences between her father and Grayson Enterprises. And then she found it. A name that appeared repeatedly in business contracts between both companies at the time. Magnus Hale. Magnus Hale had once been a business associate of both Grayson and Westwood, but right after Grayson Enterprises collapsed, he vanished from the financial world. Or rather, he changed his name, erased his tracks, and re-emerged under an entirely new identity. A shiver ran down Serena's spine. If her father had truly destroyed the Grayson family, why had a third party benefited from it all? If Magnus Hale had manipulated both families, why had Jonathan never spoken of him? She knew she had just uncovered a hidden truth, something riddled with contradictions, and she had to tell Jonathan. a truth he refused to hear. Serena found Jonathan in the library late that night. He sat at his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand, the golden light casting sharp shadows across his face. "I need to talk to you." Jonathan didn't look up. "If this is another one of your games, I don't have time." Serena tightened her grip on the documents in her hands and stepped closer. "I think I know who was really behind your family's downfall." This time, Jonathan slowly lifted his gaze. He set down his glass, leaned back in his chair, and regarded her with cold, piercing eyes. "I thought you already knew the answer, Serena. Your father did it." Serena inhaled deeply. "No, Jonathan, you're wrong. There was a third player in all of this, Magnus Hale." Jonathan's expression darkened. It had been a long time since he had heard that name. Serena placed the stack of documents on the desk before him. "I investigated. These inconsistencies, these patterns, they all point to him. He manipulated both our families, driving them into conflict." Jonathan glanced at the files but didn't reach for them. Instead, he just looked at her, silent, sharp. "So what you're telling me is that I've spent the past 7 years hating the wrong person?" Serena nodded. "Yes, and I know you don't want to believe it, but at least look at the evidence." Jonathan remained motionless. His mind had gone blank. For his entire life, he had believed that Serena's father was the enemy. He had spent 7 years rebuilding his empire just so he could return and exact revenge on her. He had married her, not out of love, but to make her suffer as he had. And now, she was telling him that everything he had believed was a lie? A battle of wills. Jonathan laughed, a hollow, cold laugh filled with disbelief and mockery. He picked up the documents, then slammed them back onto the desk. "Do you really think I'll believe this?" Serena stiffened. "You haven't even read." Jonathan shot up from his chair, the force knocking it over with a sharp clatter. "Do you take me for a fool, Serena?" His voice was low, dangerous. Serena glared at him. "No, I'm trying to help you." "Help me." Jonathan stepped toward her, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're Albert Westwood's daughter. You think I trust you? Or is this just another attempt to manipulate me, like your father did?" A sharp pang shot through Serena's chest. "I am not my father, Jonathan." "Aren't you?" Jonathan's laugh was bitter, razor sharp. "You've played your role well, Serena, but unfortunately for you, I don't fall for lies." Serena felt the air leave her lungs. She had known Jonathan wouldn't believe her easily, but she hadn't expected this level of resistance. She clenched her fists. "So no matter what I do, you'll always see me as the enemy?" "Yes." One word, cold, final. It cut through her like a blade. Serena let out a dry, humorless laugh, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then I was a fool for trying to help you." She turned on her heel to leave, but the moment her fingers touched the door handle, Jonathan grabbed her wrist, yanking her back. "You think you can just walk away?" Serena whirled around, meeting his gaze head-on. "Why, Jonathan? Why do you want me to stay? So you can keep hating me? So you can keep using me as your pawn in your revenge game?" Jonathan said nothing, but in his eyes there was something warring within him. Serena leaned in, her voice a whisper against his ear. "Do you know what's truly ironic, Grayson? You think you're the one in control, but the truth is, you've been drowning in hatred for so long that you can no longer recognize what's real." She pulled free from his grip, and this time Jonathan didn't stop her. Serena walked away. Jonathan stood frozen in the darkness, staring at the stack of documents on the desk. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he picked them up, the cracks in his armor. Jonathan Grayson had always believed that hatred was the only thing keeping him alive. For 7 years, he had nurtured it, sharpened it, let it drive him forward. Every other emotion was weakness. But there was one problem: Serena Westwood. She was cracking the walls he had spent years building, and no matter how hard he tried, he could no longer hate her the way he once did. He didn't remember when he started noticing Serena more. Maybe it was when she sat on the steps, quietly watching the rain, her deep blue eyes no longer holding their usual pride, only a profound sadness. Maybe it was when she ignored his coldness, but still cared in small, silent ways. Every morning, without anyone asking, his coffee was always on the table, just the way he liked it. Every night she never complained about him coming home late, but there was always a folded blanket left on the couch in his office. When he had headaches from work, she didn't ask, but a painkiller always appeared next to his glass of water. She didn't have to do those things, but she did. Every time she touched him, even if by accident, he no longer felt hatred. He only felt pain, as if a part of him wanted to believe her. But Jonathan couldn't. He wasn't allowed to. The night she fell ill, it started with an unexpected rainstorm. She came home late, drenched from head to toe, yet stubbornly refused his help. "I don't need your concern." Those were the last words she said before collapsing in the grand foyer. Jonathan didn't know what compelled him to carry her upstairs. He didn't understand why he stayed by her bedside all night, pressing a cold cloth to her forehead, watching her pale face as if afraid she would disappear. He should have left. He shouldn't have cared. But when her small hands suddenly grasped his wrist, her breath weak, her voice a fragile whisper in her fevered state, "Don't leave me." He couldn't walk away. A new day, a buried truth uncovered. By the time Serena woke up the next morning, Jonathan was gone. She didn't know he had stayed awake all night for her. She didn't know that the moment she stirred, he had left, like a man fleeing from something he refused to acknowledge. But Jonathan hadn't gone far. He had gone to the library, and there he discovered the truth she had been hiding. On her desk lay files, investigations into his family's downfall. Reports, financial records, evidence linking Magnus Hale to hidden transactions. She was still digging into the past. Confrontation. Jonathan didn't remember how fast he stormed into her room. Serena, still weak from her fever, barely had time to register his icy gaze before he yanked her up from the bed. "What did you do?" His voice no longer held its usual coldness. It was raw, laced with fury. Serena, disoriented, tried to pry his grip away. "Let me go, Jonathan. Are you insane?" He threw the documents onto the bed. "What the hell is this?" Serena looked down. Her heart clenched. He had seen everything. "I was trying to help you." Jonathan laughed, a bitter, scornful sound. "Help me? You actually think I'd believe you, Serena?" Serena shot to her feet, her own frustration matching his anger. "Can you stop seeing me as your enemy for one damn second? Can you just look at the evidence?" Jonathan hated the way her voice trembled. He hated the way his chest tightened at the desperation in her eyes. "Evidence," he sneered. "Or is this just another desperate attempt to clear your father's name?" Serena felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "You think I'm doing this to defend my father? What else would it be?" She let out a sharp laugh, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You're pathetic, Jonathan." Jonathan froze. "What did you just say?" Serena took a deep breath and spoke slowly, deliberately, each word piercing him deeper than he wanted to admit. "You've spent your entire life hating me. But here's the problem. If you can't hate me anymore, then what's left of you?" Jonathan said nothing. He just stood there staring at her. His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. He couldn't hate her, but he couldn't love her either. Jonathan stormed out of the room, descending the stairs as if he needed air to breathe. His heart pounded wildly, not from anger. He didn't want to believe Serena. He couldn't allow himself to believe her, because if he did, he would lose the only thing that had kept him alive for the past 7 years, hatred. And to Jonathan, that was more terrifying than losing everything. A moment later, he returned. Serena stood still in the vast bedroom, her heart pounding so violently it felt as though it might shatter. She had never imagined Jonathan could despise her this much. Her gaze locked onto his icy expression, those piercing blue eyes filled with nothing but fury and resentment. "Get out of my house!" His words cut through her like a blade. Serena swallowed the lump in her throat, her hands trembling as she fought to remain composed. "Do you really want me to leave, Jonathan?" "Yes." No hesitation, no flicker of doubt. Serena let out a quiet laugh. She had expected this. From the moment she stepped into this marriage, she had known Jonathan would never believe her. No matter what she did, No matter how much she proved herself, he would always see her as the enemy. Fine. Her voice was soft, almost weightless, but her eyes glistened. I'll leave. But remember this, Jonathan Grayson. She stepped closer, standing right before him, meeting his freezing gaze head on. You can throw me out of your house, but you can't throw me out of your mind. Jonathan said nothing. She waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. A flicker of doubt? A trace of regret? Nothing. Serena gave him a sad smile. She picked up her bag, turned around and walked away. And Jonathan let her go. But as the door shut behind her, her heart clenched painfully. She didn't want to leave, but she had to. Serena dragged her suitcase toward the gates of the Grayson estate, but her feet felt like they were sinking into the ground. She didn't want to leave. She couldn't leave Jonathan like this. No matter how cruel he was to her, no matter how much he claimed to hate her, she knew the truth beneath his cold facade. She remembered that night when she had fallen ill. All night long he had been by her side, his hand pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, over and over again. His eyes no longer sharp with disdain, but filled with an unguarded worry he couldn't hide, and he had not left. She remembered the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his fingers instinctively tightened around hers in his sleep, the way he always cared, even if he would never admit it. Jonathan wasn't heartless. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who had drowned in hatred for so long that he no longer recognized the light. She wanted to save him, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Yet she still couldn't walk away from him. She left the Grayson estate that night. Serena walked away with nothing but a small suitcase, the last remnants of her pride and a heart shattered beyond repair. She had nowhere to go, but she couldn't stop. She had to prove the truth, even if it meant never seeing Jonathan again. Serena buried herself in work. She flew to Europe, met with her father's former business partners, and combed through every contract, every financial transaction, every trace of manipulation. And finally she found it. Undeniable evidence. Secret deals. Money funneled through multiple accounts. A tangled web of deceit. Magnus Hale. He was the one who had orchestrated everything. Serena held the truth in her hands. She had to tell Jonathan, but she never expected him to find her first. The trap. Serena had no idea she was being watched. Not until it was too late. That night, as she walked back to her hotel, a rough hand clamped over her mouth. "Good evening, Mrs. Grayson." A deep, chilling voice whispered in her ear. She froze. Magnus Hale. He had found her. "You've been digging a little too much, haven't you?" Serena struggled, but he was far stronger. He dragged her into a dark alley, gripping her arm tightly, his voice laced with amusement. "Did you really think you could expose me?" He chuckled darkly. "You and your husband are both equally foolish." Serena's pulse pounded in her ears. "He's not my husband anymore." "Oh?" Magnus smirked, pulling her closer. "Even better. Then you'll die alone, and no one will know where you've gone." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Was this it? Was she going to die here, in this nameless alley? Numbers, she couldn't. She hadn't told Jonathan the truth. She hadn't cleared her father's name. She was terrified, and then Jonathan appeared. He stood at the entrance of the alley, the dim streetlight casting long shadows across his face. His hand clenched around a gun, his icy blue eyes locked onto the man holding Serena. Magnus Hale, the man who had taken everything from him. Magnus grinned, one hand still gripping Serena's wrist, the other pointing a gun at her. "You're fast, Grayson." His voice was almost mocking. "So tell me, is this pawn of yours really that important?" Jonathan didn't waver. He raised his gun, his voice steady, controlled. "Let her go." Magnus smirked. "And if I don't?" Jonathan stepped forward, his voice razor sharp. "You and I are the real enemies here. I know everything. She's innocent. Don't use a woman as a shield for your cowardice. Be a man." Serena's breath hitched. Jonathan. He wasn't cold. He wasn't indifferent. He was protecting her. Magnus was silent for a moment before letting out a slow, amused laugh. Classic Jonathan Grayson. Arrogant, self-righteous, always thinking you control everything. But still, he let go. Serena stumbled, but before she could fall, Jonathan pulled her into his arms, shielding her with his body. And then, Magnus lifted his gun. It all happened in a split second. Serena didn't think. She only saw Magnus raise his weapon. She saw his finger tightening on the trigger, and she moved. Bang! The gunshot rang out. Pain tore through her body like fire. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred. Jonathan froze. The next moment, she collapsed into his arms. Blood soaked through her white dress, spreading fast. Jonathan's world shattered. Serena! Magnus's smirk faltered. He hadn't expected her to take the bullet for Jonathan. But Jonathan no longer cared about Magnus. His world had narrowed down to her. Why? His voice was raw, broken. Serena managed a weak smile, her trembling fingers reaching up to touch his face. Because I don't want to lose you, Jonathan. Then her eyes fluttered shut. Jonathan lifted her in his arms, his heart pounding in terror as he ran out of the alley. Stay with me, Serena. You have to live. You have to live. He had never been afraid of anything in his life. But now, he was terrified of losing her. Jonathan had never known fear. But now, with Serena's blood soaking his hands, his heart felt as if it were being crushed in an iron grip. He held her close, running like a madman through the dark alley, his every step pounding against the cold pavement, his mind screaming one thought over and over. She cannot die. Serena, stay with me. Don't close your eyes. You are not allowed to sleep. She lay limp in his arms, her eyes barely open, her breath shallow. Alex, she murmured, her voice no louder than a whisper. Shut up! Save your strength! He barked, but inside he was unraveling. Everything blurred. The sirens, the voices, the chaos around him. Nothing mattered. Only her. When the ambulance skidded to a stop in front of him, Jonathan rushed in, gripping her so tightly that the paramedics had to force his hands away. Let go! I need to be with her! Mr. Grayson, we need to operate immediately. If we don't act now, she won't make it. The words sliced through him like a blade. Jonathan looked down at Serena, her face pale, her eyelashes trembling, her lips parting as if to say something too faint to hear. He couldn't lose her. Save her. Do whatever it takes. His voice was hoarse, a command and a plea all at once. The doors to the operating room slammed shut before him. The longest hours of his life. Jonathan stood frozen outside the hospital corridor, his hands clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. He had never felt this helpless before. No power, no strategy, no control could save her now. He had everything, but if he lost Serena, he would lose everything. He sank into a chair, his gaze empty, staring at his hands, still stained with her blood. This was his fault. If he hadn't pushed her away, if he hadn't let his hatred blind him, she wouldn't have gotten hurt. He should have protected her. But instead, she had taken a bullet for him. Why? Why had she done it? Jonathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his own helplessness for the first time in his life. And for the first time, he prayed. He didn't know who he was praying to. He had never believed in anything other than himself. But now he was willing to beg whoever was listening. Don't take her away from me. A fight for life. 3 hours later, the doors to the operating room burst open. Doctor, how is she? The surgeon removed his mask, his face still tense. The surgery was successful, but she hasn't woken up. We can't be certain of anything yet. It's up to her now. Jonathan pushed past them into the recovery room. Serena lay there, surrounded by cold, sterile machines, IV lines, and monitors beeping faintly. She looked so small, so fragile. He pulled a chair beside her, reaching for her hand, cold, unmoving. Serena, it's me. Silence. He squeezed her fingers tighter, his voice cracking. I know you hate me. I know I've hurt you, but you can't leave me like this. A single tear fell onto her hand. Jonathan Grayson was crying. If you wake up, I swear, I will make it up to you. I will do whatever you want. Just don't leave me. But Serena didn't respond. 72 hours of hell. 3 days. It was the longest 3 days of Jonathan Grayson's life. He had never imagined a person could go 3 days without sleep, without eating, without doing anything but waiting. But as long as Serena lay there, still unconscious, the world outside ceased to exist. He sat by her bedside holding her hand, ignoring the doctors, the nurses, his assistants, anyone who tried to pull him away. If she wakes up and I'm not here, I will never forgive myself. His voice was raw, unwavering, enough to silence any argument, and so he stayed. He watched every fragile rise and fall of her chest, every slight twitch of her fingers, every flicker of her lashes as she hovered somewhere between life and oblivion. Every passing minute felt like a blade carving deeper into his soul. Every second she remained unconscious. He sank further into despair. The third night. It was past midnight. Outside the hospital, the world was silent, the dim glow of the street lights casting long shadows on the sterile white walls. Jonathan sat motionless in his chair, his head resting against the edge of the hospital bed. His eyes were dry, hollow from 3 days without sleep. But he didn't dare close them, because if he slept, he was afraid that when he woke up, she would be gone. Then suddenly, a finger twitched. Jonathan's eyes snapped open. He held his breath, his heart pounding violently in his chest. And then slowly, ever so slowly, Serena opened her eyes, the first time he was truly afraid. Jonathan couldn't believe it. For 3 days he had braced himself for the worst. But she had come back to him. "Serena?" he whispered, his voice unsteady. Serena blinked, trying to regain awareness. Everything was blurry, but the first thing she saw was him. He was still there, still holding her hand as if letting go would mean losing her forever. His eyes were bloodshot, dark stubble shadowing his jaw. Nothing like the pristine, untouchable CEO he once was. He looked exhausted, defeated. But in his eyes, there was only one thing. Her. Serena gave a weak smile, her voice barely above a whisper, teasing despite the frailty. "You look terrible, Jonathan." A hoarse chuckle escaped him, a sound of both relief and agony. Jonathan lowered his head, pressing his forehead against the back of her hand as if he had finally collapsed entirely. "You nearly killed me, Serena." She blinked slowly, her fingers weakly squeezing his. "But I'm still here." Jonathan lifted his gaze, and for the first time, his eyes burned with emotions he had buried for far too long. "I was afraid more than I've ever been in my life." Serena's heart clenched. Jonathan Grayson, a man who once believed he needed no one, who had pushed her away again and again, was now admitting that he was terrified of losing her. She smiled even as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Did you really think I would leave you that easily?" The words she had been waiting for. Jonathan took a deep, shuddering breath before gripping her hand tighter. "Serena?" She blinked, waiting. "I love you." The words broke from him like a dam bursting. Serena froze. In all the time they had spent together, she had never imagined that Jonathan would truly say those words. But now, sitting before her, was a man who had nothing left to hide. Jonathan Grayson, no longer guarded, no longer cold, just a man placing his heart in her hands. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I used to think that hatred was the only thing keeping me alive. But when you fell, when I thought I had lost you forever..." Jonathan swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "I realized I can't live without you." Serena gazed at him, then smiled. A soft, knowing smile. "I've been waiting for you to say that, Jonathan." "I'm sorry," he whispered, pressing a tender kiss to her hand. Serena shook her head, her breath still weak, but her eyes shining with love. "Don't be, because I love you too." Jonathan tightened his grip on her hand as if he would never let go. And for the first time, after all the storms, they had truly found each other. They had married, but not for love. Serena had married Jonathan for a deal, a contract signed to save a company, to escape a fate that had been decided for her. Jonathan had married Serena for revenge, a plan carefully orchestrated to turn her into a pawn in his game of vengeance. Their marriage had begun with lies and wounds, But now, standing before each other, everything had changed. Serena sat on the small wooden bench outside Grayson Manor, watching the sun set over the vast sky. The breeze brushed against her skin, but her heart refused to be still. Jonathan had been standing behind her for a while now, silently watching. She knew he was there. She also knew something was about to change. "How long are you going to stand there?" she asked, her voice light as the wind. Jonathan stepped forward, pulling a chair beside her. He looked at her for a long time, as if memorizing every curve, every line of her face. Then in a voice deep and certain, he asked, "Serena, do you remember why we got married?" Serena smiled, though there was a hint of bitterness in her eyes. "Of course. You married me for revenge. I married you to save my company." Jonathan nodded. "I once thought marriage was just a transaction, a tool to achieve an objective." He gently squeezed her hand. "But now, I know I was wrong." Serena tilted her head, a strange feeling rising in her chest. "Then what do you think now?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up. Then slowly he knelt down before her. Serena's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man who had once treated her as a pawn, the man who had pushed her away over and over again, the man who had never once uttered words of love, was now kneeling before her. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that gleamed under the golden hues of the sunset. "Serena Westwood." His voice was steady, but there was a slight tremor beneath the depth of his emotions. "The first time I proposed to you, it was a contract. The second time I wanted a fresh start. But this time," he looked into her eyes, his own filled with nothing but pure, undeniable love. "I want you to be my wife, not because of a contract, not because of duty, not for any reason, except love. Will you marry me?" No more contracts, no more hatred. Serena felt the world slow to a stop. She had once thought that all they had was pain. She had once believed they would never find a happy ending. But Jonathan had changed. No more cold, calculating eyes filled with vengeance. No more sharp words meant to wound. No more bitterness and resentment. Just a man, offering her his heart. Serena took a deep breath. "Are you sure, Jonathan?" she whispered, her voice barely steady. "I have never been more sure of anything." His blue eyes burned into hers. She looked at him. Then slowly she reached out her hand. "Then yes, I'll marry you." Jonathan laughed, a rare, genuine laugh, filled with joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss beneath the setting sun. This time there were no contracts, no hatred, no ghosts of the past to hold them back. Only two people who had fought through everything and found their way back to each other. Life is filled with challenges, but every story holds a lesson. Sometimes loss teaches us to cherish. Failure makes us stronger. And love, real love, heals even the deepest wounds. No one is perfect, but everyone deserves to be loved. Forgiveness can break the chains of hatred. And sometimes letting go of the past isn't losing. It's finding yourself again. Thank you for following this story. Let us know what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories. Leave a comment. Share this story with others. Stay tuned for the next one.